Big doings around here in healthcare.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good Tuesday evening to you. Thanks for joining us. You're seeing this on an original date, but you might see this a couple of times when we take a day off, because I think this conversation is really important, and there's going to be some lag time between that which we are talking about and what is proposed and the final consummation of the deal. Thanks for checking into the State of Mind tonight. You know, usually I'll give you a thought or two on what's happening in the real world out there, but this conversation is pretty comprehensive. I don't want to miss anything. We've got two premier guests here from the medical field to talk about what has been proposed, which is an acquisition, some say merger, potato, you can decide which way you want to refer to it on your own, but there's no doubt that Care New England, which has a substantial position here in our hospital territory and beyond, is proposing to merge with the big guys in Boston. And right now the regulatory people are taking a look at this, and the CEO here of Care New England will explain that. We have one of his top docs from Boston to explain some of the on-the-ground stuff. All right, so with no further ado, why don't I just lay out Ted Nesi's coverage of this conversation, which will give you the right foundation.
In Massachusetts, few organizations are more powerful than Partners Healthcare. The company owns 12 hospitals, including Mass General and Brigham and Women's.
We are very committed to the mission of academic medicine.
Dr. Elizabeth Nabel is Brigham's president.
That's exceptional patient care, but it's also research, making basic discoveries and translating those discoveries into new therapies for patients.
Now Partners is seeking to expand south by acquiring cash-strapped Rhode Island hospital group Care New England. Women and Infants, Kent, and Butler hospitals would all join the division of Partners that's led by Nabel.
Care New England came to us, Brigham Partners, and said, would you engage with us? And we said, sure. They've made great progress, but there's still work to do, and there's still financial instability.
I met Nabel at the Brigham to learn more about the deal. She says it should mean no major changes for Rhode Island patients.
Nothing is going to change in terms of their doctors, their care provider.
Nabel insists the goal is not to redirect Rhode Islanders up to Boston.
We want to keep care affordable. A great way to do that is keep care local. For care like a pneumonia or heart failure or a knee replacement, that care can easily be given in the community at a community-based hospital.
She's also enthusiastic about partnering with the Brown University Medical School.
We feel between Care New England, the Brigham, and Brown, we can really build strong academic medicine in Rhode Island.
And she has big plans for women and infants.
We know women and infants is an extraordinary mothers and babies hospital. You could see a regional center of excellence in women's health, babies' health, being in Providence.
All right, so nothing to worry about. It's all set. Forget it. We're good. But no, there are questions that a lot of people have, and there's regulatory issues here, and there are questions of economy and jobs and where are we going healthcare-wise and all that kind of stuff. I've already had Dr. Jim Finale on the radio show last week to cover this with Dr. Walls, who's the COO of Brigham and Women's. Now we have Dr. Chester Hedgepeth, who is the head of cardiology or chief of cardiology at Care New England, but hail us from Boston and Brigham. So good to have you guys. Appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
So far, so good in terms of the regulatory process?
Yeah, I mean, the regulatory process continues. The Department of Health is doing its review. As I've said, the update is that they've asked for a whole bunch more information, which is not unlikely. And so we're now working through providing a response to their questions for more information. And I'm hoping within the next several weeks that all that information will be into the Department of Health, and then hopefully at some point within a short period of time they'll deem the application complete.
So we'll, I just want to cover a couple of short business issues, and we'll talk to the cardiologist about the on-the-ground stuff. Don't forget, though, one of the interesting things about hospital executives is mostly they're all doctors, or at least in this particular case. So you are not unfamiliar with on the ground. You and I had a really good philosophical conversation about how your medical experience advises your management decisions. Explain to me how that has impacted your decision, if I read it correctly, to pick up the horn and say, hey, Boston, we may want to do some business together.
Well, that's an extremely important part. So I've taken care of patients for many years, actually still do some of that. And to me and to our organization, this is all about taking better care of the patients that trust themselves with us. And at Care New England, we have a lot of great hospitals, a lot of great providers that work with us, but we've had some difficulty in really advancing the things we want to do. There's no question that the financial ramifications of how we performed over the last couple of years has left us in a little bit of a bind. Now, financially, we've turned that ship a bit, and we're at break even and doing a little better than that, which is a remarkable turnaround on the part of our staff. But if we want to do the best job caring for our patients, in today's day and age, we need to have access to a broader array of services and programs. And so to me, this means, this vision is, let's take better care of our patients. By working with the Brigham, we have a better platform for quality. We have access to a broader array of programs and services. And again, we've been undercapitalized for years, and the ability to have access to capital to fix our buildings is important.
Right. So your ability to figure out what you need in the emergency room, in the operating room, in the eval room, advises this whole situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, the trouble with Memorial Hospital has given you some pause. We'll give me 10 seconds on that, and then in our third segment, we'll dig in a little bit in terms of what the status is on Pawtucket. But if not for that, would you guys be okay?
No, I don't think if not for that, we'd be okay. It certainly caused a more acute move, but if you believe in 10 years ago, the amount of capital we had available and debt borrowing was very, very difficult. I think Memorial helped catalyze this move because, backing up, the Care New England for 4 or 5 years has been looking to search for a partner to have a broader array of services. I think the Memorial situation just caused it to be more acute.
Got it. So our head of cardiology can tell us, now you're still a Boston guy, and you come down on a regular basis to Kent and run the show there. The one thing that people worry about when you merge like this is, where's all the talent headed? Is it all headed north? In this particular case, you're running south on 95 to work as opposed to north on 95,
correct,
right?
and or many of my colleagues. So, when I first started at Care New England, the directive was start a program at Kent which you would be proud of, and which it really improves the care for the patients in that area. And you can't do that by shuttling patients and intellectual property out of state. You have to put it in the hospital, build robust programs there, and build a business, and build relationships and a framework of care for patients.
In your category of expertise, and it's mainstream, cardiology is something that every community needs the best of expertise on. Are there things that you cannot do in Rhode Island that you ship people north for, or is just about anything that presents you can handle?
So I have a rule, which is it's a 90-10 rule, 90-10. So 90% of care maybe even 95% of care can be performed or given at a community hospital. And that would be, if you take the top 10 diagnoses in cardiology, you would encompass about 95% of the care. So if we get really good at taking care of 95%, we would have been a great community hospital. But there's 5% or maybe even 1% of care which is not appropriate for a community hospital. That's the major heart surgeries, the reoperations, the heart transplants. Those would be better served in Boston.
Like, I guess it's peace of mind for people to understand that if the 90 or 95% can diagnose and recognize that which needs to be the 5 to 10% up there, that everything's good. And that's part of the synergy that you're talking about, right?
It's definitely part of the synergy. There's no surprise that maybe over the last several years, probably that's 5 or 10 years, a couple hundred patients may wind up in Boston. There's no question, either through patient choice or something that cannot be delivered locally. but it's about 1% of our patients go. Patients want to stay locally, and as Dr. Hedgepat, how can he build a great program if he's sending everything out? So I think that's the defense of the argument that says everything's going to go to Boston.
And do you feel the same way in terms of even your competitors with Landmark and Rhode Island Hospital and the whole thing? The expertise here in general in Rhode Island is at an equitable level?
It's terrific. I mean, it's a terrific group of colleagues that we have in the cardiology community. So
And you guys all talk to each other, depending on, it doesn't matter what the paycheck
every
says,
day,
correct?
every day.
Yes. You're sharing that info back and forth because people bop back and forth to different facilities. All right, let's talk about the economics of this when we come back. Stay with us.
My priorities will be keeping care local. Rhode Islanders shouldn't have to drive to Boston for their health care. Keeping jobs local. I won't be able to support anything where there's a lot of job losses. And keeping costs down. And we're going to look very carefully to make sure that whatever proposal is before us keeps the jobs here and keeps the care here.
Governor Raimondo reacting this winter to the news that Care New England asked Brigham and Women's to the dance here or for a date, and they're looking to put their businesses together right now. There's some question, obviously the politicians and our government leaders, the governor included, are going to be concerned about the economics of this and jobs and whether or not everything's going to get shipped north. So, Dr. Jim, what's the answer on that one?
So as we pledged, there is no plan diminution or closure of programs and services as a result of this deal. We have no plans. Actually, we have plans to expand things that we do clinically for our patients, and with the help of the Brigham, we'll be able to expand things. Some of the concerns about administrative jobs and as you bring things together, there will be some synergies. But overall, the bedside clinical jobs, we're actually looking to expand some of the stuff we're trying to do into the ambulatory field and others. We think net, even with some synergies, we're still going to be ahead of the game with more jobs. And we think the other important thing is as we have the access to capital, start fixing some of the stuff we need to fix. You think about the construction work and the other stuff that we're going to do as we renovate Kent, which needs its units modernized. They're 30 to 40 years old. The additional ability to have construction and other things done locally, which will be done locally, will be an enhancement to the state.
Is Dr. Hedgepeth's experience, how long have you been commuting now down to Kent?
7 years.
So, so this is, God, we can't get you to buy a house down here. You're still
It's my wife's fault.
For crying out
It's my
loud.
wife's
I mean, that's a
fault.
whole nother show, for
Believe
God's
me.
sake. You know, the water is beautiful down there. You know,
It's quite nice.
It is. Gee whiz, you guys need to have a meeting. But will we see some of this duplicated? I mean, obviously, we have a 7-year program, and you're heading this up, and you're taking. I'm guessing that you were at Brigham for quite some time before
Yes,
you
since
came
2000.
down. Okay. Have you created a model for duplication outside cardiology?
Oh, sure.
Is
Yes.
does that give a chance for increased jobs and economy down here?
Absolutely. So the clinical affiliation started with cardiology, but is now expanded to colorectal surgery, vascular surgery, thoracic surgery, and a lung program too. So yeah, because of the success of the initial programs and the demand, the programs are growing, and we would expect the same. So that's doctors coming into Rhode Island. That's expanded services and offerings.
Let me give
for
you an
patients.
example.
Sure.
Okay. In the lung program, which we're working through, we have patients with a certain lung disease. I'll call it interstitial lung disease, and I'll teach you about it later. But that's a disease that has a specific problem and a specific plan of diagnosis and treatment. Heretofore, patients, again, a lot of them would go to Boston or elsewhere for this. They go on their own to go there. We're going to set that up at Kent. Those patients are now going to be evaluated, treated, diagnosed
Because
at Kent.
this is the fascinating thing about this. I could talk about this all day. You evaluate. Obviously, you're not going to start a program unless you've got fertile ground for it to succeed.
Correct.
Which, chicken or the egg? You set up a program and hope that they come, or you recognize there are people who have these maladies in certain categories and they're underserved. That's
We
got to be
know
the
that-
interesting part of the business model.
So we know the number of patients we have with these diseases through a number of various mechanisms, and we know we're sending them out of town. It might be something that the local hospitals don't have. So we know that some of our providers in the community, not employed by us, are sending patients with this specific illness to Boston all the time. Imagine if we now could say all those people can come to Kent at a special program once a week we hold for those patients. Okay, they be diagnosed and treated. You know, some of them with this disease at point may need a transplant. And we're not going to do a lung transplant in Rhode Island. They're not being done. So that would be something, the continuum of care that we'd be arranging as a part of our program with the Brigham, where that lung transplant would be set up and done.
Yeah,
in
and
Boston.
I don't think people get too upset about the regionalization concept. I mean, we go to ball games at Fenway. I mean, if you can position it that way, and you know, I think in large part, Rhode Island's economy could benefit from having a much more regional and less provincial approach anyway. So perhaps that model feeds itself. So net jobs, short answer, plus.
We think net plus. There may be some different jobs that would be synergized, but that we think net yes, definitely.
Why did you not call Landmark and say, hey, let's get together?
Landmark.
Rhode Island Hospital.
So lifespan.
Lifespan. I'm sorry. I do. You know what? I do that all the time. All the corporate names are hard for people to remember.
Well, they both start with an L.
Landmark is the hospital in Woonsocket, by the way. Lifespan.
So we did have a discussion with Lifespan. It's clear. It's been in the public press that we, all of our organizations came together a year ago. We talked together about.
Well, that's why the deal didn't happen.
And the deal didn't happen. I mean,
because
three parties couldn't come to an arrangement that everybody thought would work. And so our position now is clear. We think we have to move forward with our transaction because we've been working on it for 2 years, access to program service. We don't want to wait another year or two. And what we've told Lifespan, and we said this last week again, is once our transaction is complete, we're absolutely open to sitting down with Lifespan, the Brigham and Care New England, and seeing if there's a path forward. No question about it.
You mean another transaction?
Yep.
Is there a too big to fail model that we have to worry about here?
I think the issue about why we said, and Dr. Nabel said this last week pretty eloquently, was that we moved this sequentially and incrementally is because being that big carries a whole lot more scrutiny from antitrust perspectives from the feds and also probably the state. So we were pretty clear that we knew confidently that we would get this transaction through from a regulatory point of view in terms of antitrust and monopolization, right? We also knew pretty clearly that if we all tried to come together, it would take a lot longer. And I don't think anybody will dispute that. And it may not get approved. Even though people say this would be great, it may not get approved.
Okay, so and forgive me, there are a couple of things, you know, I hate when I make a mistake, Landmark and Lifespan, but I certainly have followed the conversations you had with Lifespan. What happened there? Was Partners / Boston Brigham in the conversations, or when you guys couldn't make a deal, you went north? Or has there been a synergistic kind of, I mean, you guys all talk to each other all the time
All three
anyway.
of us were in the room together.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
As it's been publicly reported, the three entertained the discussion together as three parties.
Okay. So this is part one of what could be.
Yes.
Not necessarily has to be.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Agreed.
All right. And what happens in Pawtucket when we come back? Stay with us.
We're not trying to blame, we're just saying, listen, it can't be another year that we're waiting on this. As we sit here today, we're asking them to almost clear the property down, right, because the building, it has some issues, and then turn it over to the city so we can go out and look at options. We're never going to see that 200-bed hospital. Nobody is asking for that, right? But we do understand that emergency service. So whether it's at that site or on a different site, we have to understand what Care New England's looking to do.
Talk about a guy who's in a lot of stress. He loses the paw socks, he's got Memorial Hospital, Hasbro, you don't know where they're going to end up. That guy needs a break and probably some certainty when it comes to Memorial Hospital. So you have limited the operations there. There's no longer an operating hospital, but there are things happening at the building, right? What is the ultimate plan for that building?
I'd say a couple things. One is we are committed to keep our outpatient services there. What we have there is a lot of primary care clinics, specialty offices. We're pledged to stay on the site. As a matter of fact, the volume's grown. We've always committed to that population, and I've agreed that that will remain. The hospital's closed, broom swept, and if people remember, that hospital required about $40 to $50 million of upgrades. It just, when you're losing $3 million a month, it's hard to do that. Now, as the mayor has asked about turning the property, I think that becomes a different regulatory problem with the Attorney General, because these are charitable assets that simply cannot be transferred, such as that. That said, we're working, we've engaged in developers. Some developers have come along with some solutions to the property. We certainly will do that together with the mayor. Actually, we're meeting with the mayor presently.
Whatever happened with Charter Care? Didn't they want to talk about buying the place at one point? And that's Roger Williams
Yep.
and
St. Joe's.
St. Joe's. Is that conversation dead?
During that conversation, it was I think if I remember correctly, it was a press release that they wanted to acquire the property, put $10 million in it. We subsequently, after they did a press release, got a letter a week later. I've never heard since then. I think it's...
That was when we first actually met
Yes.
on the phone.
Yep.
You were at Attention Convention during that whole situation. I guess that might have been one of the reasons why. So that's off the table, obviously.
I haven't heard anything. I think the issue is...
Whatever they say they put on the table was not even on the table, is what you're telling me.
No.
All right. So in general, it seems like we'll touch base. You don't expect any blips, but you never know. You'll have some questions to answer when it comes to the regulators. I hope in Rhode Island we are more competent in this field than we are in many regulatory matters. We'll see how that whole thing goes. But in general, Doc, tell me about the overall environment when it comes to docs. Are we still building guys like you? Are we recruiting? Is this field going to make it, or is this thing going to be broken up and all you're going to get is a little blood pressure at CVS, for crying out loud? I mean, what's happening here? And you've got a minute to tell me about the entire industry's future.
That's, I think it's the perfect question, because the field on the high end is training academic researchers and scientists and technologists that are building digital medical devices that are going to change the way that we interact with the medical field. And then a lot of people are transitioning out of medicine on the lower end, on the primary care end. And so we're going to see more nurse practitioners and physician assistants and even digital assistants providing entry-level care. But there's always going to be a need for the compassionate, face-to-face interaction with a trusted provider.
And
It's not going away.
do we have an industry that's still incentivizing young people to pursue that career?
Absolutely.
Can you still make a
Absolutely.
buck?
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing
Yes.
to have a mission to save lives. It's another thing to have to suffer to do it, right?
Yeah.
I think they are incented. Listen, this is a great industry. We get to help people every day. There's not a better job that you can have. And I think physicians, it's a plight, it's difficult. But at the end of the day, you couldn't have a better job.
So hopefully we'll be able to touch these guys' bases from time to time, especially on issues like health insurance and the like, because that's a whole nother bailiwick, one of the most difficult things on an economic basis to understand. Appreciate your being available and to discuss this thing publicly. It obviously is a community conversation. Best of luck. Congratulations on it. We'll check it out when it gets approved. You
Thanks,
hope.
sir. We hope. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Final word and we come back. Stay with us. Listen, one of the things I would recommend is that you pay attention to the medical community, who owns who, what, where. I mean, it's an L word, landmark, lifespan. I knew what I was talking about, promise. But we're really not exceptionally informed as a general population, and this is not just Southern New England, this is in general, about who owns what, where, and how. And, you got to manage your own health care. You don't have the expertise if you're not a doctor, but you really need to know who owns what and what they're doing and where your solutions lie. So be informed on these things, will you? Joe Fleming, our political pollster on much of what's happening poll-wise and beyond, locally and nationally tomorrow night. See you on the radio at 3 on WPRL. Thanks for watching. Bye.